For 50,000 years, the stars had watched humanity's silence. Tonight, they would finally speak. I'm Ambassador Renteka, and as I stood on Station Meridian, I watched a distant nebula paint the void in violet and crimson. My people, the Salthari, evolved from ocean dwellers who read currents in water. Now, my job is to read currents in politics, and I sensed something dark flowing toward the Galactic Assembly. Around me, the station's central plaza hummed with life. Diplomats from across the galaxy gathered, sharing drinks, discussing trade routes and cultural exchanges. Everything felt normal, safe, and that was the problem. A familiar voice cut through my thoughts. You look troubled. It was Operative Kess, a Drin agent who moved like a shadow. His silver, mantis-like form shimmered, his compound eyes reflecting me in 100 tiny fragments. Bad news from the frontier? 17 colonies went silent last week, I replied, my voice low. The Council blames it on communication failures. But 17 different systems, using 17 different technologies, all failing at once? It's not a coincidence. Kess clicked his mandibles, a sound of grim understanding. The harvesters? We didn't need to say more. For 3 cycles, something had been moving through the outer territories. Worlds that thrived one day were empty the next. No survivors. No distress calls. Just a chilling silence spreading like frost across the galactic map. The Council will debate until the harvesters reach the core worlds, Kess stated. We need something they can't ignore. Proof. Evidence. A weapon they don't possess. I turned from the window, my heart heavy. What kind of weapon? The kind that's been sleeping for 50 millennia. He led me down into Station Meridian's forgotten levels. The sleek composite walls gave way to ancient, scarred metal. Few remembered that Meridian was built on the bones of a much older station, a relic from the first age of galactic unity. We arrived at a door that shouldn't exist, its surface covered in symbols that hurt to look at. Kess produced a key that looked more grown than manufactured. Where did you get that? I asked, a sense of awe mixing with my fear. From someone who believed answers matter more than rules, he said. The door opened with a sigh, revealing a chamber that defied geometry. It stretched further than the station's blueprints allowed, filled with archives that predated most modern civilizations. In the center stood a monument, not a statue, but a chair. Simple, functional, made from a metal that absorbed light. Strange symbols covered its surface, seeming to shift when I wasn't looking directly at them. The empty seat, Kess said softly. One of 12 original Council positions. 11 are still occupied. This one has been vacant for reasons most have forgotten. I approached it slowly, feeling an indescribable presence. The chair radiated an absence, a void where something significant used to be. Who sat here? They called themselves humanity. Their world was Terra, circling a yellow star they named Sol. Kess activated an ancient holodisplay. Images flickered to life, showing beings who walked on 2 legs, with forward-facing eyes and skin in a spectrum of colors. They were one of the founding species. Warriors, diplomats, explorers. They helped forge the peace that lasted 10,000 years. What happened to them? I asked, captivated. Kess pulled up another file, this one heavily encrypted. 50,000 years ago, they launched a deep space expedition beyond the galactic rim. The expedition vanished. Kara sent rescue missions. Those vanished too. Then, something appeared around the Sol system. A barrier, an impossibility. Ships that approached it simply ceased to exist, not destroyed. Just gone. The holodisplay showed a star system encased in something like crystallized space, its geometric patterns bending light in impossible ways. The Council quarantined the system, Kess continued, declared it a hazard zone. Over centuries, the reason was forgotten. The records were sealed, lost, then sealed again. I spent 8 years tracking down fragments, piecing together what really happened. I studied the images of humanity. They looked fragile compared to us. No natural armor, no venom glands, no telepathy. Why show me this? Why now? Because I found something in the deepest archives. A file labeled Final Protocol. Kess's voice dropped to a whisper. It describes a defensive measure humanity created before they vanished. A weapon system they called the Sentinel Network. Automated defense platforms scattered across the galaxy, designed to activate only under specific conditions. What conditions? I breathed. Existential threat to galactic civilization. Mass extinction events. Harvester-class attacks. Kess met my gaze, all 100 reflections of me staring back. The kind of threat we're facing right now. A chill ran down my spine. You're saying humanity predicted this? I'm saying they prepared for it. And the activation key is somewhere in the Sol system, behind that barrier. He pulled up classified military reports, each marked with humanity's symbol, a circle with smaller spheres orbiting a central point. Their military doctrine was different. We fight defensively, to minimize losses. Humans fought to win. Their battle records describe tactics we consider impossible, even insane. Calculated risks, aggressive maneuvers. They called it peace through superior firepower. Just then, the station trembled violently. Alarms began to shriek through the ancient corridors. Kess's communicator erupted with panicked voices. Harvester fleet detected. A voice cut through the chaos. 73 capital ships. Eta to Station Meridian. 4 hours. All ships are ordered to evacuate immediately. Kess and I locked eyes. 4 hours. Not enough time to evacuate everyone. Not enough time to mount a defense. The Council's fleet was scattered, maintaining an illusion of security. The Council will run, Kess said flatly. They'll abandon the outer territories and buy time with other people's lives. Then, we need to give them a reason to fight. I looked at the empty chair, at the symbol of a species that chose to stand when others would have fled. How do we reach the Sol system? I have a ship, an old one. Its hull signature might be old enough to pass through the barrier. Kess hesitated. It's an untested theory. It could vaporize us the moment we touch that barrier. Or it could save billions of lives, I countered. I placed my hand on the chair's armrest. The metal felt warm. Humanity left this seat empty, but they didn't abandon us. They left insurance. They left hope. Hope is a human concept, Kess said. Then maybe it's time we learned from them. I straightened, my purpose clear. Take me to your ship. We have 4 hours to attempt the impossible. As we ran, I couldn't shake the feeling that the empty chair wasn't empty at all. It was a guard post, waiting for someone to remember what humanity taught the galaxy. Some thrones aren't about ruling. They're about standing watch in the darkness. And when that darkness arrives, you meet it not with retreat, but with the terrifying truth that some species refuse to kneel. The harvesters were about to learn what the galaxy had forgotten 50,000 years ago. Some fires never truly go out. They just wait for the right moment to burn again. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this story, please like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell for more tales from the far reaches of space. Until next time, stay curious. The ship Kess called Remembrance looked like it was pieced together from the graveyards of dead civilizations. Its hull was a tapestry of scars from weapons that no longer existed, and its engines hummed with a strange frequency that made Rentika's bones ache. But it flew, and right now, that was all that mattered. Through the main viewport, Station Meridian shrank behind them, a casualty of the coming storm. Evacuation ships were scattering in every direction, like dandelion seeds on a cosmic wind. Most were heading for the core worlds, chasing an illusion of safety. But Rentika and Kess were flying in the opposite direction, toward a legend wrapped in nothing but warnings. Council dispatch is calling us traitors, Kess said, his voice a low hum as he monitored the communications array. They've officially issued an arrest order. Apparently, stealing classified information and commandeering a historical vessel during a crisis is considered criminal behavior. Add it to my resume, Rentica replied, her eyes fixed on the star charts. She was tracing the route to the Sol system. 6 jump points. 12 days of standard travel. They didn't have 12 days. Can this ship do better than standard jump drives? Kess's mandibles clicked in what might have been amusement. The Drin didn't build this ship for sightseeing. Hold on to something. In an instant, the universe folded. Rentash's stomach lurched as space itself compressed and expanded around him. Impossible colors painted themselves across her vision. When reality finally snapped back into focus, they were hanging in an empty region of space she didn't recognize at all. What was that? She gasped, her knuckles white on the console. Slipstream drive, Kess explained. Banned technology from the Unification Wars. Humans helped develop it before deciding it was too dangerous for regular use. Cuts travel time by 90%, but it has an unfortunate tendency to deposit ships inside stars. Or, spread their atoms across light years. He adjusted their trajectory. We'll reach Sol in 18 hours. Probably. Probably? The drive has a certain artistic interpretation of navigation coordinates. Renteca decided it was better not to ask for clarification. Instead, she pulled up the data files Kess had stolen from the archives. Page after page of humanity's history scrolled past. Wars fought on their own home world long before they ever reached the stars. Endless conflicts over resources, beliefs, and territory. They were a species that should have destroyed itself 1,000 times over, but somehow they didn't. They were so fractured, she said, reading about something the humans called a world war, divided into hundreds of nations, thousands of cultures. How did they ever unify enough to join the Galactic Assembly? That's the thing, Kess said, bringing up an image of Earth from orbit, a stunning blue marble swirled with white clouds. They didn't unify, not really. They never truly became one people. And that was their strength. Every other spacefaring species we've ever encountered achieved unity by eliminating diversity. One language, one culture, one way of thinking. But humans, they kept their differences and learned to make them work together. The files showed her human cities that were a chaotic mix of architectural styles from a dozen different cultures. They showed ships crewed by people who spoke different languages, but shared a common purpose. She saw military units where soldiers with opposing beliefs stood shoulder to shoulder against external threats. They had a saying, Kess continued. Unity doesn't mean uniformity. It meant they could disagree on everything and still stand together as one when it mattered. Narration. Tekka found combat footage from the Unification Wars, when the early assembly fought against the Collective, a terrifying hive mind species that sought to absorb all sentient life. She watched human ships execute maneuvers that violated every tactical doctrine she'd ever learned. They would break formation to exploit the tiniest of advantages. They sacrificed pawns to protect more valuable pieces, playing a kind of three-dimensional chess at relativistic speeds. In one battle, a single human destroyer faced down 3 collective dreadnoughts. Instead of retreating, the destroyer accelerated directly toward the enemy fleet, drawing all their fire while broadcasting a massive reactor signature. The collective ships, seeing an easy kill, focused their weapons. They didn't notice the human carrier group that jumped in right behind them until the missiles were already in the air. The destroyer's captain died with her entire crew, but the collective fleet was destroyed. The battle was won. They fought like every single engagement was personal, Renteca whispered in awe. Like they had something to prove. They did, Kess said. They were the newcomers, arriving in a galaxy full of species that had been spacefaring for millennia. They were physically weaker than most, with no natural defenses. Their home world was a gravity well that made launching anything into orbit hideously expensive. He pulled up statistics comparing human physical capabilities to other species. By every logical measure, they shouldn't have even survived first contact, but they had something others didn't. What was that? Stubbornness, creativity, and a cultural memory of always being the underdog. Kess's eyes glittered with something that looked like admiration. Every human alive carried the genetic legacy of survivors. Their ancestors had endured ice ages, plagues, predators, and their own worst impulses. They looked at a hostile galaxy and just saw another challenge to overcome. Suddenly, the ship shuddered violently. Alarms shrieked through the cockpit. Rentaika grabbed her restraints as something massive and terrifying appeared on their sensors. Harvester Scout ship, Kess announced, his voice tight. And it's directly between us and the Sol system. The thing on their screens looked like a mechanical sea creature from a nightmare. All sharp angles and weapon ports. It was already scanning their trajectory, calculating their intent. Can we outrun it? Rentica asked. We have kinetic cannons from the early assembly period. 3 missile tubes with ammunition that's only 50,000 years old, and something the original specs call a... We have kinetic cannons from the early assembly period. 3 missile tubes with ammunition that's only 50,000 years old, and something the original specs call a... Terran Special. We have kinetic cannons from the early assembly period. 3 missile tubes with ammunition that's only 50,000 years old, and something the original specs call a... Terran Special. What's a Terran Special? I have absolutely no idea, Kess replied. Terran Special. What's a Terran Special? I have absolutely no idea, Kess replied. But humans named it, so it's either going to be brilliant or completely insane. The harvester ship moved closer. The ship moved closer, its weapon ports opening like hungry mouths. It was 10 times their size, armored in materials that could shrug off modern weapons. One good shot would vaporize the remembrance. Rentika's mind raced, recalling the combat footage she'd just watched. Human tactics, human thinking. Don't fight fair. Don't play by the enemy's rules. Find the weakness and exploit it without mercy. The harvester ship is scanning us, she said, her thoughts crystallizing. It's trying to determine if we're a threat. We're not, Kess grumbled. I could shoot it with everything we have and barely scratch the paint. Exactly. So we don't shoot to damage. We shoot to confuse. Renteka pointed at their sensor display. Fire everything at once. Maximum spread pattern. Make it think we're not one ship, but multiple ships. Kess understood immediately. His mandibles clicked rapidly as he programmed the firing solution. Kinetic rounds on random vectors. Missiles set to spiral and evade, and the Terran Special, activating in 3, 2, 1. The remembrance erupted with a barrage of weapons fire that spread across space like a shotgun blast. Kinetic slugs traveled on diverging paths. Missiles corkscrewed through the void, and the Terran Special did something that made Rentika's eyes widen. The device created holographic projections, dozens of them. Each one looked like a distinct ship, complete with its own engine signature and weapon lock. The harvester, which had been facing one antique vessel, was suddenly confronted by what appeared to be a small, aggressive fleet. For 3 crucial heartbeats, the harvester hesitated. Its sensors frantically tried to determine which targets were real. In that brief moment of confusion, Kess slammed the activation for the slipstream drive. Space folded. The harvester vanished behind them, left scanning empty space for enemies that were no longer there. Humans built a weapon system that projected fake ships? Renteka asked when she could finally breathe again. Psychological warfare, Kess said. They understood that a fight isn't just about firepower. It's about making your enemy doubt, fear, and hesitate. He brought up their navigation display. We're 3 hours from Sol. The barrier should be visible soon. Those 3 hours passed in a tense, profound silence. Renteka read more files, diving deeper into humanity's history. She found their art, their music, their literature. She discovered stories about individuals who stood against impossible odds, songs about loss and hope and defiance, paintings that captured emotions she didn't have words for. And she found a phrase that appeared over and over in their military records, written in dozens of languages, but always meaning the same thing. We hold the line, not we retreat, not we negotiate. We hold the line. A simple, powerful declaration that some things matter more than survival, that some positions must be defended, regardless of the cost. There, Kes said softly, his voice pulling her from her thoughts. The barrier. Through the viewport, space itself seemed to end. A wall of crystallized energy surrounded the entire Sol system, geometric patterns flowing across its surface like liquid mathematics. It was beautiful and terrifying, a monument to a level of technology that shouldn't exist. I'm reading massive energy signatures, Renteka said, her hands flying over her instruments. The barrier isn't just a wall. It's actively processing information, computing. It's alive in some way, or it's waiting for something, Kes added, slowing their approach. According to the old ship logs, the barrier appeared exactly 7 days after the last human transmission was ever received, as if it knew they were gone, and it sealed the system to protect what remained. Protect it from what? From us, Kes said, a new weight of understanding in his voice. From a galaxy that might want to steal or destroy whatever humanity left behind. They didn't just vanish, Renteka. They chose to isolate themselves, to remove their influence from the galaxy. The real question is why. The remembrance drifted closer to the barrier. Energy crackled across its surface, patterns shifting and reforming. Renteka could feel her heart's beating faster, a twin rhythm of fear and excitement. What if we're wrong? She asked, her voice barely a whisper. What if there's nothing inside but graves? Then we'll be the first beings in 50,000 years to witness how humanity died. Kes positioned the ship directly in front of the barrier's intricate patterns. But I don't think we're wrong. I think they left something for us. Insurance for a crisis they knew would eventually come. How could they possibly know? Because they studied history. Their own history. They knew that peace never lasts forever. They knew that darkness always returns. And when it does, someone has to be ready to stand and fight. Kes engaged the engines one last time. Hold on. This is either going to work, or we're about to become a very brief, very bright light show. The ship touched the barrier. A wave of pure energy washed over the hull, the flowing patterns covering their screens. Renteka braced for dissolution, for the end of consciousness. But instead, the barrier opened. It didn't tear or break. It welcomed them, like a door recognizing an old, familiar key. The remembrance passed through into the Sol system, and Renteka gasped at what was waiting for them on the other side. It wasn't death. It wasn't silence. It wasn't a system of graves. It was an armada. The armada stretched across the Sol system, a constellation of steel and purpose. Thousands of ships hung in perfect formation, their hulls dark and silent, just waiting. Each vessel bore the symbols, Arishan, Teka had seen on that empty chair in the assembly circles and orbits representing humanity's home world and the star that warmed it. But these weren't ghost ships. As the remembrance drifted deeper into the system, lights flickered to life across the fleet. Dormant systems were awakening. Ancient engines hummed with power that had slept for 50 millennia. They're responding to our presence, Kes said, his voice a mix of wonder and fear. The entire network is coming online. Renteka's instruments were flooded with data. The ships were communicating with each other in languages her translator couldn't even begin to interpret, passing information at speeds that shouldn't be possible. And at the center of the formation, near the third planet from the sun, something massive was powering up. What is that? She whispered. The structure defied easy description. It looked like a station, but it was larger than any artificial construct she'd ever seen. Rings within rings rotated around a central core, each layer covered in technology that predated modern civilization. As they watched, the core began to glow with a light that felt warm even through the vacuum of space. Suddenly, a voice filled their cabin. It spoke in the galactic common tongue, but with an accent that belonged to no living species. Vessel remembrance, you are recognized. Drin construction, crew composition mixed species. State your purpose for entering the Sol quarantine zone. Kess and Rentika exchanged glances. The voice was artificial, yet it carried something beyond mere programming. An awareness, a presence. This is Ambassador Rentika of the Sol3 delegation and Operative Kess of the Drin Intelligence Corps, she said, fighting to keep her voice steady. We've come seeking the Sentinel Network. The galaxy faces an extinction-level threat. We need the weapons humanity left behind. Silence stretched for long, tense moments. Then the voice returned, and this time it carried something that might have been sadness. The Sentinel Network was never a weapon. It was a promise. A final act of service from the species that understood the weight of guardianship. The central station's core brightened, and suddenly, Rentika could see through the light into something else. Not a hologram, but a memory preserved in energy itself. She saw humans not as images in ancient files, but as they had been. Living, breathing, real. She saw scientists in labs, their faces lined with exhaustion and determination. She saw military commanders arguing over strategies, voices raised in passion, but united in purpose. She saw families saying goodbye, children who didn't understand why their parents had to leave, why everything was changing. 50,000 years ago, humanity detected something beyond the galactic rim, the voice continued. An intelligence vast and hostile, consuming everything in its path. We called it the consumption. What you now know as the harvesters. The memory shifted, showing space itself being devoured. Stars winking out as something incomprehensible moved through the cosmos. It wasn't ships or machines, but a force of nature given terrible purpose. Humanity ran calculations, the voice said. Our best minds worked for decades, modeling every possible future. The conclusion was always the same. The consumption would reach this galaxy. And when it did, no species would survive alone. Not even humanity. Rentika watched as the memory showed humanity's greatest scientists presenting their findings to the Galactic Assembly. She saw the other species dismissing the warnings, calling humanity paranoid and warlike. The Assembly was at peace. It didn't want to hear about threats that might arrive in 50,000 years. So we made a choice, the voice continued, and now Rentika understood the sadness in its tone. We couldn't force the galaxy to prepare. We couldn't make others see what we saw. But we could ensure that when the darkness finally arrived, there would be someone standing guard. The memory showed the construction of the barrier, the encoding of human consciousness into the station's core, the systematic evacuation of Earth, billions of humans boarding colony ships, spreading across the galaxy under false identities, hiding their true nature. We faked our disappearance, the voice said, made it look like we'd encountered some catastrophe, sealed our home system behind an impenetrable wall. The galaxy forgot about us, and that was the intention. While you built your peace, we built the Sentinel Network. Defense platforms scattered across every major shipping lane and trade route. Automated systems designed to activate when specific threat parameters were met. You've been watching us, Kess said quietly. For 50,000 years, you've been hidden among us. Humanity never left. We just stopped being human in the way you'd recognize. Our descendants walk among you now, wearing different faces, speaking different languages. Some know their heritage. Most don't, but all carry genetic markers that key them into the Sentinel Network. The memory shifted again, showing humans transforming, adapting, interbreeding with other species. creating hybrid lines that carried forward the human tendency towards stubborn creativity and protective aggression. "We seeded the galaxy with guardians," the voice said, "and we left this place as the command center, staffed by volunteers who chose to have their consciousness preserved in synthetic form. We've watched civilizations rise and fall. We've guided developments from the shadows. We've prevented 3 galaxy-ending catastrophes that you never knew existed. And now, when the threat we predicted finally arrives, we're ready to fulfill our promise." Rentica felt tears sliding down her face, her body responding to emotions she hadn't known she could feel. "Why?" she asked. "Why sacrifice everything? Why give up your identity, your culture, your very existence as a species?" "Because someone had to," the voice replied simply. "Because we looked at the galaxy and saw something worth protecting. Not perfect, not peaceful, but alive, diverse, full of potential. We understood something that others didn't, that true strength isn't about ruling from a throne. It's about standing guard while others sleep safely. It's about being willing to vanish so that others can thrive." The station's light intensified, and Rentaka felt energy washing over the remembrance. Data flooded their systems, tactical information and activation codes flowing faster than she could process. "The Sentinel network is now active," the voice announced. "Every platform across the galaxy is powering up. The Harvester fleet approaching Station Meridian will encounter resistance they cannot overcome. But Ambassador Rentica, this is not a gift without cost." "What cost?" she asked. "Once activated, the network cannot be deactivated. It will remain active, protecting the galaxy from external threats. But it will also require maintenance, oversight, guardians who understand its purpose." The voice paused. "Humanity chose to stand watch. Now we're asking the galaxy to join us, to understand that peace requires eternal vigilance. That freedom requires someone willing to defend it." Kess leaned forward. "You're asking us to take humanity's place. We're asking you to stand beside what humanity became, to fill that empty seat in the assembly not with humans, but with the principle humanity represented. The understanding that some lines must be held, some prices must be paid, some sacrifices must be made." Through the viewport, Renteka could see the human fleet beginning to move, thousands of ships that had waited 50 millennia for this moment. They weren't crewed by living humans, but by consciousness preserved in synthetic form, volunteers who had chosen to give up everything to protect a future they'd never see. "The harvesters will be stopped," the voice said. "But they're only the first wave. The consumption continues. It will send more, bigger, stronger. The galaxy will need to learn to fight, to sacrifice, to stand together not because they agree on everything, but because some things matter more than disagreements." Rentica thought about the empty chair in the assembly, about the symbol of the species that had vanished rather than demand recognition for their service. She thought about the stories of humans who stood against impossible odds, not because they expected to win, but because someone had to try. "Earth stood alone," she said softly, understanding finally clicking into place. "You never needed others to validate your choice. You just needed to make it. And now the galaxy stands with us," the voice replied. "Or they learn to stand at all. Ambassador, your ship's navigation system has been updated with Sentinel network access codes. Return to Station Meridian. Tell the Council what you found. Give them the choice to fight or flee. But know this, humanity's promise is kept regardless. We will hold the line. We've been holding it for 50,000 years. We can hold it for 50,000 more." The remembrance began turning, guided by forces beyond their control, preparing to exit the barrier and return to the galaxy beyond. But before they passed through, Rentica asked one final question. "Are there any humans left? Real ones? Not descendants or preserved consciousness, but people who remember what humanity was." The voice was quiet for a long moment. Then it said something that sent chills through her body. Look in a mirror, Ambassador. Look at every species in the assembly. We didn't just see genetics. We shared ideas, stories, values. The human tendency toward protective stubbornness spread further than Han DNA. You felt it the moment you decided to come here instead of running. That impulse to stand and fight when standing means everything. That's human. That's the legacy we truly left behind. The barrier opened, and the remembrance passed through into normal space. Behind them, the soul system vanished, once again sealed and secret. But now Rentika understood the truth. Humanity hadn't vanished. They'd multiplied. They'd become something larger than a single species. They'd become an idea that lived in every being willing to sacrifice for others, to stand guard while others rested, to hold the line when darkness came calling. The throne had always been empty, because thrones were for rulers, and humanity had never wanted to rule. They had only wanted to serve.